Welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about all things board game related. We are here with a review of Professor Evil and the Citadel of Time. This one is from Passport Games and Funforge.
It's a 2 to 4 player game.
Co-op game.
Co-op. You have the evil professor, and he's gone around the world and stolen all of these treasures or artifacts from different time. We have like the Ark of the Covenant and the Rosetta Stone, the Golden Jewel, and a bunch of different other things. In his secret lair, or citadel, there are 12 rooms in which he will be roaming around and turning switches off and closing doors behind him, trying to capture his own treasures and put them into a vault. We, on the other hand, as a team, are trying to go in here and steal, basically, for these treasures before he's able to lock them into a vault in which we can never get to.
Right, so everything we're trying to do is the opposite of what he's trying to do. So he's going to be running around closing doors that we've unlocked and turning switches off that we've turned on.
Right. So there are 12 switches. To understand the switches, a switch has both an on position and an off position. There's several different types. And on the bottom, it tells you how many of each different type there are. So for instance, this electrical switch, there's 2 of them somewhere randomly up on the board. To start the game, 6 of these will be turned on and 6 of them will be turned off. Also, 3 treasures will populate the overall rooms. There's 12 rooms. There's 12 location cards which represent where these treasures may be. So you're going to seed an X number of treasures, being 3, into these rooms by drawing location cards.
Right, and the treasure cards are tied to the switches because each treasure card is going to have a number of the different switch types on them. And in order to interact and grab that treasure, you're going to have to turn all of those switches of those types on.
So just to show you how the game sets up, we had the workshop, we had the study, and the parlor all flip up, which means you draw the top treasure and you put them into each of those locations. You're also going to notice a number on each of these different treasures that tells you where it goes upon the clock according to where the marker is. The marker is going to start at the 12 o'clock position. So this treasure here, it says 30, so you would count down to 30 minutes, for instance. When new treasures are introduced, you're going to count down from where the marker currently is. So if it comes out of 30, it's actually going to come over here.
Exactly.
30 minutes from that location. So you're going to see the board with each of those different treasures that start.
Yeah, and the way that clock works is that marker represents Professor Evil's progress towards getting the treasures himself.
Yep.
So once that black marker overtakes one of the treasure markers on the clock, he picks it up. We won't.
Now, if you're feeling particularly good about your chances of getting treasure, you can intermix the 3 or the 4 55 treasures in here. And you may think to yourself, well, that just gives you more time to find them. However, there's 3 treasures, and they're all the hardest possible treasures that you can get.
To flip all 3 of those switches and all of those switches will take a lot of doing.
Yes. The players, depending on how many players you're starting with, are going to start outside of the actual citadel itself. There's 3 entry points into the Citadel. You have windows that lead into the gallery, the library, and at the very top at the ballroom itself. The professor will start inside of the laboratory, and then between each of these different rooms, you're going to see these black pieces of wood. These are the actual doors that you'll be opening and closing. It also needs to be noted that in each of these rooms, there's a number of floor mats that represent the movement that he could be moving throughout his own Citadel. All right. Also, players are going to pick characters. There's 5 different characters that you can pick from, which give you some variety. And then each player is going to have 6 action cards. These are abilities that you'll be using on your turn.
And specific to their characters.
Yes.
In addition to the cards, you're going to get a character tile. And these don't start with any variable powers, but throughout the game, there's going to be something, these marks on the clock, that's going to trigger the ability to flip your tile. And the group, as a team, can decide who wants to flip their tile. On the back of the tile, there's going to be an anytime action that you can then use that's basically lets you bend the rules a little bit. And then at the bottom, there's a you're really going to break the rules type of action. The rub here is when you use that, you have to flip the tile back over. Now again, you're going to pass spaces on the clock that would allow you to flip your tile, so you could flip it back over if that's what the group agrees on.
Right, so the game, it's very simple to play. There's 3 different actions you're going to take on your turn. The very first thing you're going to do is you're going to shuffle your 6 cards, and then you're going to draw 2 off the top of the deck. You can look at those cards and decide which one of these you wish to use. However, before you take your actions or after you take your actions, you can use one and only one of these. So both of them, regardless of which one you use, they're both going to go into the discard pile. Your actions, there's 4 different things that you can do. One of them is to move. Each location that you move to has to go through an open door or through an open window. You can only enter into the mansion. You can't leave the mansion. And that's one movement per room. Then you can unlock doors.
Yeah. In addition to movement, if there's a door that's locked in your way, it takes an action to unlock that door. And then the third action is when you're in a room, you can turn a switch on.
Yes.
So you're basically interacting with one of the switches. And the fourth action is treasure related.
Yes, as long as you have all of the switches of a particular treasure on, you can capture a treasure if you're in the room with it. So for instance, looking at the golden idol, if we have all of the silver or gray looking switches turned on and I'm in the location where the golden idol is located, we can save this treasure. And it simply goes up towards the top of the board into the save treasure. Now remember, that's the only win condition for the players, is to collect 4 of those treasures before the professor collects 4. Now, at the end of a player's turn, you're going to roll the dice, and it's going to determine a couple different things that are going to happen. Number one, the easiest one to understand is the black die. There's either a 1 facing or a 2 facing on here, and that determines how far on this track clockwise the black marker at the professor is going to move. In this case, just 1 step forward. And remember, if it ever hits this location or this location, one of the players at the table can flip over one of their special abilities.
Exactly. So the professor's going to move 5 or 10 minutes closer towards picking up the treasures. The second thing that's going to happen are these dice here. And this dice can be one of many different phases, and then this one shows different colors. What's the first phase
So
there?
the first one here you see is a blue and the number 10. That simply means that the blue treasure is going to move backwards 10 on the dial. So you'd go 1, 2. There's another facing on here that shows a 5, which means that color would move back that many spaces. Also, you'll notice that there's movements. There's a 1, there's a 2, and then there's a 3. The professor is going to move that many spaces depending upon what's rolled. So in this case, if I rolled a blue 3, the professor is going to move through any of the blue mats, locking any of the doors behind him, and turning off any of the switches that he moves into. So in this case, he'd move here, lock the door behind him, and he'd turn the switch off. And then he'd go through the blue here, lock the door behind him, turn the switch off, and then the blue here, and the same thing.
Exactly. And it should be noted, he can ignore locked doors, so he doesn't have to open the door. He's just moving about, but he locks all the doors behind him. So if you've spent a lot of time unlocking doors, he's going to foil your plans.
Now, if he moves into a room or through a room with a player, that player is then ejected from the Citadel and has to go to the entrance point again. Will have to come in through one of the windows.
Right. There is one more space on the die that is this space right here.
Yes, and that simply means he's going to move to that treasure. So for instance, if it's a blue, the professor will move directly to the treasure with the blue icon on it. And that's pretty much the player's turn. Remember, you're only allowed to use one of the 2 cards that you have. You can use it before or after your 3 actions. Once you're done, you're going to pass the dice to the player on your left. That player is going to draw 2 cards from his deck. He is going to take 3 actions, and he's going to roll the dice. And you're going to keep doing this round after round, trying to capture the treasures before these markers come and capture them from the professor himself.
Right. And if you didn't pick up on it already, that pesky professor does move after every single person's turn. It's not after a round. So I'll go, the professor goes. Jeremy goes, the professor goes. He keeps going.
One of the other cool things about the game, too, is when you do capture a treasure, if you are one of the characters, and say, for instance, we found the Rosetta Stone, you'll notice it requires locks and a data pad. Once you capture that treasure, all the switches that were involved with that are going to turn to their off position, meaning that for the next treasure you capture, you have to go all the way back through the mansion again and return the switches back on to capture the next treasure.
Right.
The other thing is you always have 3 treasures on the board. When a treasure is either captured by one of the players or by the professor, you're going to introduce a new treasure, and that's simply done with the location deck. You're going to flip it over and then draw a random tile from the top. That's the game.
That is the game. What do you think about it?
I like this game a lot. I mean, it has some mechanics in it that are a little bit close to like Forbidden Desert and Forbidden Island.
Definitely feels like those games.
Very similar feel to it, although I feel in this game that there's a lot of cool things you can do. I love the player cards. Like these really break the rules and give you some really cool abilities that don't necessarily require you to be in a specific room. Like some of them will let you throw switches in a room that's far off. Some of them will even let you throw switches in a room where the professor is. Now remember, the professor's only going to throw a switch when he moves into the room. So regardless if he's in there or not, you can still manipulate the room. But it gets tricky when he's in a room and you need to flip an exact switch, or recover a treasure, and you can't get in there because the moment you move in there, he sees you and you have to be ejected from the mansion.
Right. The other thing, too, I like about the cards, compared to something like Forbidden Island or Forbidden Desert, in those games, everyone starts with one variable power, you know, the roll.
Yeah.
And in this one, you unlock those and you can use them and they're a little more enhanced, but those are further enhanced by having all these cards.
Yeah.
Whereas in those games, you usually have to wander around and some people find items that they can use, some people don't find items. This gives you that satisfaction of every turn you're going to have one of two items or abilities that you can use, which makes it a little bit more fun to break the rules.
Yeah, also there's a lot of variability in the game too and how it sets up. The switches are going to be placed all over the place in very random positions. The way that the treasures come out are going to be very random. And then you can even randomize the characters. With 5 characters and only 4 possible players, you're always going to have an ability to mix and match the characters for unique abilities.
Well, and speaking of randomness, the way that the professor moves and interacts with the board and the game is very much more interesting, I think, than the Forbidden games.
Yeah.
You know, I think Forbidden Desert is the one that has the wind storm that moves around, but it moves around in a very simple and basic way.
Yeah.
This, on his turn, he does a variety of different things. And even when he does a movement, because of those floor mats, he's moving around in a very different way. It's very unpredictable, and it can really screw up your plans.
It totally can, because a lot of times you want him to physically get out of a room. And there's moments where half of the die facings don't make him move. It makes a treasure come closer to the marker. So you're always praying for him to move in some way, and when it doesn't happen, you have to start concentrating on a different treasure, knowing that he's going to get that one on the next turn.
Yeah, I think once you get familiar, too, with your character's cards, you can, and there's not very many of these cards, so you're
6.
using two a turn. And I know that I believe there's some in there, for instance, that would allow you to shift the professor out of the current room that he's in. So once you get a handle on your character, you can start to at least get a sense for what you can do and plan ahead a little bit more.
Yeah, it needs to be noted, too, that when you've used all of your cards, you're going to draw 2, use 1, draw 2, use 1, and then draw 2 and use 1. Then on your next turn, you're going to shuffle all these up. So it's not going to be in the same order in how you get those cards in the next round. Very cool game. I like this co-op game. Very simple to learn. It's great for gateway people. It's great for enthusiasts.
Oh, yeah. This is an incredible gateway for a co-op game. Like any family, just like the Forbidden games. But I think maybe even more so because you're moving around a map very easy. It's got a similar look and feel to sort of old school board games. You know, you're moving around a mansion. So I think that families would get it pretty easily.
And this artwork is fantastic.
Oh, it's a gorgeous game. We didn't even touch on that.
Yeah, every single one of these characters has unique artwork. All the treasures have unique artwork. The board itself is absolutely beautiful. It's not hard to recognize things on the board, even though it may look a little bit cluttered.
Yeah, the presentation's amazing. The artwork, and not only that, but the graphic design makes everything really clear. The iconography is very simple. The colors they chose, very good.
So that is Professor Evil and the Citadel of Time, a new co-op coming out at Gen Con. 2017, so go check it out there. If you have questions about the game, make them in the comments below, and we will answer them for you. Subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and everything else that we do, and we will catch you guys next time.
Bye-bye.
Season 1 of Man vs. Meeple is sponsored by our friends at TMG Games. And at Cool Stuff Inc. Cool stuff in stock at coolstuffinc.com.